This is a training on Thurston County's coordinated entry system. Our community as Thurston County has multiple providers of coordinated entry. And Thurston County Public Health and Social Services contracts with the Family Support Center for the development and ongoing management of our system here in Thurston County. Family Support Center of South Sound, we're the lead contracted provider. We also serve as the entry point for families with children and survivors of domestic violence. Olympia Mutual Aid Partners is the single adult provider serving households who don't have kids under the age of 18. So this includes singles, couples, households with no dependents under 18. And then Community Youth Services serves as the young adult provider, and they're serving youth and young adults up to age 24. Just a couple of overall reminders about coordinated entry. It's a process that's developed to ensure that all people who are experiencing a housing crisis have fair and equal access to resources. The goal is for households to be quickly identified, assessed, and referred and/or connected to housing assistance based on their strengths and individual needs. And coordinated entry is not an immediate placement to housing or shelter. There's 4 components to coordinated entry, which include access, assessment, prioritization, and referral. To start, we'll talk about accessing coordinated entry. So each of the coordinated entry providers, again, Family Support Center, OLIMAP, and CYS, have various options for households to access our intake and assessment process. It could be phone, video conferencing, as well as in-person appointments. Each of our locations have an office and provide walk-in support, and outreach and in-reach at key community locations take place in order to better connect with individuals who may have trouble getting to the provider location and/or doing intake via phone. So that means that each of us can serve clients at our offices, and then we're also doing specific outreach at other organizations in the community, which we'll talk about. So where can you find coordinated entry? So Family Support Center, we're located in West Olympia, and we schedule intakes 7 days a week because we utilize our staff who are at our shelter to help with intakes. So primarily a lot of the intakes are happening via phone, but we have walk-ins available at our office Monday through Friday. Olympia Mutual Aid Partners, they have scheduled appointments on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at their office. They're located in the basement of First Christian Church in downtown Olympia. And then they have walk-ins on Thursdays from 11 to 3. They're in the process of developing a function on their website that people can self-schedule. So keep an eye out for that. The Family Support Center is on site at Pier Olympia on Tuesday afternoons. We're also on site at North Thurston Family Youth Resource Center. We're there weekly, but the second and fourth Thursday are specifically for coordinated entry. Coordinated entry, whether that's Family Support Center or OLIMAP, are on site at the Veterans Hub in Lacey every Thursday from 9 to 1. And then we're also on site at various shelters depending on the need. So we've been at Quinn Street quite a bit. We're working to get at the Union Gospel Mission and are working ultimately to get to any of the places in which our community members who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness are. We might be at the library at some point. So we're really keeping that open and responsive to what the community needs are. And Rosie's Place, which is Community Youth Services, they're available daily for the youth and young adult population, and their website is the best place to get a sense of what's going on and what's up to date with them. We also have 24-hour access. So we have the coordinated entry shelter and housing hotline, and we use one phone number, which you'll see at the bottom of the screen, so that all populations can call one number 24/7 to get connected to the right provider based on their population. So people call and they get routed based on what they select. There's singles, there's families with children, youth and young adults, and then there's an option for other non-housing related crisis, which routes to the Crisis Clinic of Mason and Thurston counties. And there's also an option on there to get connected to the county's COVID quarantine and isolation program, which was started during the COVID pandemic. So Family Support Center answers our extension 24/7. CYS answers theirs 24/7. And then OLIMAP answers the single adult extension Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And then Family Support Center covers that extension after hours and on the weekends. So there's always someone answering that phone. And if someone doesn't answer, it routes to a voicemail, which then goes to the provider to respond. And again, the number is 844-628-7343. The next phase is assessment. So in the last couple of years, our community worked really, really hard to get rid of an old assessment that we were using known as the VI SPDAT, and create a new tool that was rooted in equity and addressing disproportionality in our homeless crisis response system. So we're now using what we call the HEAT tool, or the Housing Equity Assessment Tool. This tool is used for families and single adult households. We've been using the tool for families for a year now, since March 2022, and singles started using it in about mid-August. There's specific supplemental surveys for households who identify as Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ, and gender nonconforming, substance users, and families. So depending on how someone answers, additional questions may populate for them to answer based on that identity or factor that's impacting their life. So someone who identifies as Black and lesbian is also going to be answering the BIPOC supplemental and the LGBTQ supplemental. Anyone with a child under 18 is going to be answering questions specific to the family population and have some family supplemental questions. So we're working as a community to use the tool to gather information about how well it is assessing households, and a work group, a subset of the coordinated entry subcommittee will begin in this spring of 2023 to dive into any concerns or challenges with the tool. It's done really well, and we've used it hundreds of times on families and single adults. And as we're really getting into it, we're realizing, maybe this question isn't answered quite right, or we're not getting what we expected out of this question. So a work group is forming to help really evaluate and assess and make sure the tool is doing what we had hoped it would. The tool that we use for domestic violence survivors is a Jackie Campbell danger assessment. And this tool uses research-based indicators to predict the risk of death from homicide. Back when we were using the VI SPDAT and before we started using the Jackie Campbell assessment tool for survivors, we were seeing survivors who were at high risk of being killed by their perpetrator, to be very blunt and honest. And when they were doing the VI SPDAT or the single or family assessment tool, they were not scoring very high because those vulnerabilities, they weren't capturing the right vulnerabilities. So we made a decision as a community to use the Jackie Campbell danger assessment for survivors. And it's also used as an opportunity to safety plan and best support the survivor who's going through domestic violence at that time. And ask questions about increased incidents of violence, access to weapons, any history of strangulation or choking, substance use, and other risk factors. And then this tool is used to populate the domestic violence master list. It includes all survivors who are interested in being offered a domestic violence specific resource. And at this time, the primary referral from that assessment and that list is for rapid rehousing. The youth and young adult assessment, it's a population specific assessment tool. It's shorter, and it was created as part of the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. And so it was vetted and created from youth and young adults, and is a good opportunity to assess those risk factors that are really specific to that population. So eligibility for multiple lists. There are times when households are eligible for multiple populations, and then they're assessed by the applicable tools based on or placed on the applicable list, So perfect example is a 19-year-old who's pregnant fleeing domestic violence. That person is eligible for all of the lists. They're 19, so they're eligible for the youth and young adult list. They're pregnant, so they would be considered a family under the family list. They're fleeing domestic violence, so could be served under the DV list. And because they don't yet have a child in their care, they could be eligible for the single adult master list. So it's determined and eligible by each of the clients that we're serving, what they're interested in. And if they are interested in all of the lists and all of the potential resources, then they could get assessed by all of the tools. We work really diligently as a community and as partners to not ask the same question 7 times, but we will work diligently to say, okay, you've already answered all of these questions on this one assessment. We can skip over them because they already have the answers. So we do our best to make it as seamless and easy for the client as possible. So support with completing assessments. It takes a village, and we as Coordinated Entry and Family Support Center have built solid relationships with a number of our providers who have completed a training to do the HEAT assessment. And as of January of 2023, 99 providers in the community had been trained on the HEAT. They're on the ground doing direct service work, helping to assess and reassess households with a HEAT, ensuring that people have quick access to the master list. When we launched the use of the new tool, we had a lot of everyone that was on the list at that point had been assessed with the VI tool. So we had to work to get people reassessed using the correct tool. So it's been really beneficial to have so many providers in the community helping with that. And they've helped a tremendous amount to get hundreds of people assessed. All of the intakes that are completed in the community by community partners come to Family Support Center to our data specialist. That position scores the packets, completes all of the data entry, and follows up on any issues or questions in the packet. For example, if we keep getting packets from John Smith at ABC organization and they always forget to answer a question, or they didn't provide, they were missing a page, our data specialist responding and saying, hey, John, you missed page 3 of the packet. I really need that to complete. So we're able to get the information going immediately, and then ultimately get the people back on the master list as soon as possible. And Olympia Mutual Aid Partners, they process their own packets. So they do all of their own intakes and assessments, and they process their own packets as the CYS. Some of the providers that have been trained are Olympic Health and Recovery Teams, Partners in Prevention Education, Salvation Army, Drexel, Safe Place, DSHS staff, Crisis Response Unit, Innovations Human Trafficking, Sidewalk, Peer Olympia, and the list goes on and on. So we're really appreciative to all of these partners because they're helping people get access to the system way faster than we could with our small teams that we have. So list management. Family Support Center maintains and manages the master list for families with children, domestic violence survivors, and single adults. So that means we process the packets from community partners, we get people on the list into the system, we do the HMIS data, and we manage all of the referrals off of the master list, which we'll get into in a little bit. Community Youth Services manages the youth and young adult list. And so as the responsibility of managing the list, we are responsible for the placements to housing and shelter, or any other resources from coordinated entry. So CYS and Family Support Center manage those. And again, we'll get into list and referrals in just a minute. So next is prioritization. So how does it work? Once a household is assessed using the applicable tools, so either the Jackie Campbell Danger Assessment, the HEAT tool, or the Youth and Young Adult tool, a score is populated. And that score puts the household on their applicable list. And people are on the list based on the score and date of their assessment. The highest scoring households are on the top of the list. And the lists are fluid. So remember that, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but the lists are fluid because people are added and removed from the list on a daily basis. New people have an intake and get added to the list. Some people get housed and get off of the list. Some people fall off the list because they're not active or we haven't had any engagement with them in the past few months. So the list is fluid and ever changing. And resources are distributed based on people's eligibility and where they are on the master list. So referrals from coordinated entry. As I mentioned, we hired a specific coordinated entry data specialist to manage all of the placements from coordinated entry. A vast majority of that is for the single adult population because there are so many providers that we place to. This position ensures that households are connected to a resource as quickly as possible. We and clients have clear understanding of the eligibility requirements, and a feedback loop exists when clients are denied so that we know why clients are denied. The reason we want to know denials is so that we can help make better referrals. And then in a sense, we can also hold projects accountable if they say, oh, we denied this person because of X, Y, and Z. And it's like, but they met all of your eligibility requirements. So did your requirements change? And we sent a bad referral. So it's been really beneficial to have this awesome and regular feedback loop. This position and this change reduces the burden on the single adult provider to manage intake and placements, and it increases the collaboration with providers and streamlines the placement process. Some examples of where we place to. So family projects include Rapid Rehousing, Parablossom Place, which is our shelter and apartments. And we have 2 other shelter programs as well that we place to that Family Support Center operate. Housing Authority projects, permanent housing projects like the Landing that we're developing, Billy Frank Jr., etc. The single and couple projects include Quixote Village, Drexel House Permanent Supportive Housing, Unity Commons, Interfaith Work Shelter, Plum Street Village, Hope Village, Quinton Street Village, Drexel Shelter, and anything else that comes online placing from coordinated entry. Our staff, our coordinated entry staff did what we call a tour of the town from like November to January, really trying to get to know all of the providers. Like, hey, can I come see your site so I can explain it to the person when I call and say there's a spot open for them? Or help me understand what this process looks like. And let's have a face with the name, because we've been so in COVID world that we are getting back to seeing people in person and in 3D and trying to build those relationships. So this really became beneficial, because people now know, oh, I just need to pick up the phone and call so-and-so over there and they'll help me immediately. And an opportunity to be able to give real honest feedback back and forth of this worked really well and we're still struggling in this area. So it's been a really beneficial investment in time to do that. So some frequently asked questions about coordinated entry. So my client needs emergency shelter. Can coordinated entry help? The short answer is no, because coordinated entry doesn't place into emergency shelter. So our emergency shelters for our community, and this is recorded on March 20th of 2023. So as of this moment, the Union Gospel Mission for single adults, Rosie's Place for youth and young adults, and then any additional cold weather shelter that opens from November to April. Those are our emergency shelters that do not place on coordinated entry. The best thing that people can do is reach out to the coordinated entry hotline to find out what shelter options might be available. Coordinated entry does place to continuous day shelters, which includes Interfaith Works for couples and singles, Drexel House for single males, and Pear Blossom Place and Family Support Center shelters for families and with kids and or pregnant individuals. My client completed coordinated entry. Now what? So after someone's completed intake and assessment, they're placed on their population-specific master list, which is the housing and shelter list. They will be contacted when a resource becomes available. And clients are encouraged to keep in touch with coordinated entry. Either directly, they're calling our intake person or calling our data person to say, hey, I still exist, here's my updated phone number. Or they can do that through their associated provider, which is specific to the single adult population, who can update their information in RAGIC. So for example, John Smith did coordinated entry with OliMap in January, and they're also receiving services from Sidewalk. Their staff at Sidewalk, their case manager probably has access to RAGIC and can put in there and put notes to say, hey, I saw John Smith. He's still sleeping at the mission on every night of the week. They're able to help keep people active. And that's something that we've worked really hard on to make sure that the right people are having access to RAGIC so that we can help keep all of the individuals who are experiencing homelessness active in our system who need it. So my client can stay with friends or family for 30 days. How can coordinated entry help? So we have what's called diversion, and for households who have identified somewhere to stay for at least 30 days, we might be able to help with flexible financial funds that could help pay for the rent for the house that they're going to stay on a couch. We could help with utilities or groceries to help them stay somewhere. It could also help pay a deposit for someone that is getting into their own housing. Anything that can help the household exit homelessness and find more stable and safe housing. The key thing to know is that if someone uses diversion and they're diverted from the system, they'll be considered housed and they're no longer on the master list. So at times we do assessments with folks and we don't think that they score very high. What can we do about that? So if you've completed an assessment with the household within the last year, we do not recommend reassessing. Historically, we found that when we keep reassessing people, the score goes down. It doesn't actually go up. It also causes trauma. We're asking the same questions over and over again, and it's not super effective. So if the assessment did not capture a vulnerability, that may be a situation where you can ask the bypass of the list. And that's essentially means that you're skipping all of the households ahead of them because a vulnerability was not captured. So that might be that, yes, the heat assessment assessed all of their current vulnerabilities, but it's not accounting for the fact that they have a medical device that has to be plugged into electricity, which is required in order for them to stay alive. That is not captured in the heat assessment, and that might be something where you could put in a bypass. If the tool did assess all of the household's vulnerability, a bypass is not warranted. What we often tell people is that when you're doing a bypass, need to be able to feel confident and strong enough in the convictions and the reason that you're putting in this bypass that you can stand in front of everyone that you're skipping on the line and explain why. And I'm skipping 300 people because A, B, and C, and be able to convey that to providers at our monthly coordinated entry meeting of these are the bypasses that we put in. This is why we approved them, or this is why we denied them. Because we have an assessment for a reason, and we have a tool that a lot of thought and hard work was put into, and we don't just now want to have a system that operates on bypasses only because it's defeating the purpose of the tool. So if you're not sure about this, or you're like, maybe I have a bypass, I would definitely reach out to our coordinated entry program manager to discuss it further and see maybe this is a situation. But ultimately, do not keep reassessing the household. It's not that helpful. And I think if you're feeling that you need to do that, you should really reach out to the program manager to have a conversation and see what might be possible. So where is my client on the master list? That is a really hard question to answer. As I said before, the list is fluid. People are added and removed daily, and people are placed based on their assessment score and the date of the assessment. And so as people are added and removed, the position may change going up or down. And just because someone scored low, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be called for a resource, because each of our shelter and housing providers have different eligibility, and not everyone is interested or eligible in that resource. So for example, a single male who, scores middle of the road and is interested in Drexel shelter, you might be like, man, they're so far down, they're never going to get called for Drexel. But not everyone on the list identifies as a male. Not everyone on the list is going to be interested in Drexel. Not everyone on the list is going to be eligible for Drexel. So it's not hopeless. It's not a guaranteed no. And those lists change. And sometimes, they might have a bunch of people ahead of them, but we can't get in touch with anyone despite all of the efforts in the world. So we don't like saying you're at the top, it's great, or you're at the bottom, you're never going to get anything, because it changes all the time. And new resources, though it doesn't feel like it all the time, new resources do come online at times and move more people off of the list. So again, we will never tell someone you're number 37 on the list, because that's not how it works, because that could change in an hour. So I think my client did coordinate entry, but I don't know if they're quote unquote active. So clients need to be active within our system during the last 90 days in order to stay on the master list. And so for the single adult population, we track this by the last date of contact in RAGIC. And then for families, we do that, and the youth and young adult population, we do that based on like case notes and staff interactions. So if you have a client who did coordinate entry in the last year and you need to update their information, or you're trying to figure out if they have, if they're active, it's best to get a release of information and reach out to coordinated entry at the information on the screen in order to figure out what's next and what's happening. Do we really have to use coordinated entry? Yes. While the system is not perfect, we collectively have made huge changes to our system in the last year. I mean, just since July, so much has changed. We've grown, we've streamlined some things, we've learned from the past, we've increased capacity, and it's required. It's required by HUD, it's required by the county. And it really is, when it's highly functioning and really great, it's in the best interest of clients to not have to go all around town. Even though at times there's definitely things that fall through the cracks, and we're all humans and we make mistakes, and we make mistakes at times, but as a system, we do have to use it, and we want to hear your feedback of what's going on. If it's not working, or you're having people fall through the cracks, or you can't get a call back, come to our coordinated entry meetings, reach out to our program manager, ask questions. We want that. We want that feedback loop. This is not family support center system. This is our community system, and we want it to work for our community. So please come and help us improve it. So some just last minute resources and key things for you to know. We have a website on Family Support Center's website that a work group of the coordinated entry committee came together to provide guidance and recommendations around a website. They looked at a lot of other community CE websites and helped create this website. So thank you to all of them. And it includes some frequently asked questions about how coordinated entry works. Many of them were addressed here in this PowerPoint. And the website is largely geared towards providers. It can definitely be a little jargony, but it really was intended to be for providers so that they can help ensure that accurate and up-to-date information is out there for households experiencing homelessness. We have a coordinated entry committee. We meet monthly on the second Thursday of the month from 9 to 10 on Zoom. To be added to that, you can email JC Osterberg Brown at Coyote, and her information is here on the screen. Typically, we have upwards of 20 to 30 providers at each meeting. Sometimes we've had as many as 60. And we give updates on the system, what's working well. A work group is going to be forming to evaluate the heat tool in the next couple months or month or so. And so again, this is our community system and our community's resource. So we really want provider engagement and provider feedback about what's going well and what's a challenge. And then if you have questions, comments, concerns, a scenario you want to run by, Amber Christian is the coordinated entry program manager and is a great resource for people. Her contact information is on the screen, or you can always just email ce@fscss.org to get information as well. But we appreciate all of our partners in the community who are helping with coordinated entry, and believe that with the work of all of us, we can continue to have a high functioning system to make sure that our individuals and households in the community who need it most have access to it. So thank you so much.